Think big, you get big. Think big, you get big.
How important is it to think big?
Yeah, I mean, you have to think big. If you're in this room right now, who doesn't live in Vegas? You people made the decision to come here, buy a ticket, get a flight, book a hotel room. You got to pay for your food. Why did you do that? Right? Because you're already thinking bigger. You don't like where you're at. You want to hear some different stories. You want to get some ideas. How the hell do I get out of what I'm doing right now? How do I do it?
Think big, you get big. Think big, you get big.
If he thinks that thinking big is changing the Muhammad Ali act, altering the ring, the look of feel of it, that's all bollocks. A Zuffa belt, that's thinking big. That ain't thinking big. That's actually a disaster, in my opinion. Because at the end of the day, fighters want belts. They want legacy. They want to walk in the footsteps of the heroes and greats who have picked up those championship belts before them. Now, money solves everything. But Dana's not going to pay mad money because they don't do that. And they know the value of the fight. So you imagine going to a fighter, a Shakur or a Boots or these kind of guys and going, right, listen, come and work in this with us with this new ring and all that kind of stuff. By the way, you can't fight for the WBC, the IBF, the WBA, the WBO. But what you can do, in your first fight, you can fight for the Zuffa belt. There's no interest in that. And I like this because it enables me to double down on that route. And I'm sure with the Paramount deal, maybe there's a new wave of casual fans that will buy into a new ring and a Zuffa belt and stuff like that. Not me. I will not sell out boxing like that.
There's got to be perspective in this discussion when people talk about belts. And you can't just dismiss belts because if the boxers are fighting on networks trying to sell fights, the belt is used as a promotional tool. Like the two main sanctioning body presidents, Gilberto Mendoza Jr. and the likes of Mauricio Suleiman, will tell you about the legacy of holding one of their belts. And the boxers will use the same rhetoric because some of them grew up watching boxing with their dads. They saw Floyd Mayweather with the green belt, and Floyd would say the green belt is the best belt. Their dad may have watched boxing with their dad, I saw Sugar Ray Leonard with that belt, Thomas Hearns, Larry Holmes, Muhammad Ali. But here's the thing. The WBC came into existence in 1962, and they used to hand out trophies. The belts came later in the 60s. I don't know what date. I don't have that. And the belts were not green belts. They were black, leather, or satin belts with a silver medallion with the weight class written in it. I've did some research. And I haven't found nothing to suggest that the WBA didn't start giving out belts to maybe the mid to late 70s. So when we're talking about legacy, none of these belts have more lineage than the Ring Magazine belt. You can see Henry Armstrong with all these Ring Magazine belts. I'm going to imagine this picture was took 1937, 1938. And that would be the first two Ring Magazine belts he won at feather and lightweight. It was in the 80s where we got the 4 sanctioning belts. Around this time, the TV networks would saturate the fight cards with title belt fights. When we started to get Intercontinental, WBC, International, WBA, or whatever. And by the 90s, it just got ridiculous. WBC, WBA, IBF, WBO, WBU, WBF, IBO, and there was more. And this became the trend. But in 1985, when Barry McGuigan fought Juan Laporte, which was the acid test before he fought Eusebio Pedrosa for the WBA 126-pound title. It was just a 10-rounder. The main event at the King's Hall, Belfast, Sports Night, BBC One, primetime slot, Wednesday night, just a 10-rounder. No belts attached to it, nothing. And I haven't got the viewing figures, but you have to imagine at least 4, 5, maybe more. I'm just giving a low estimate. But when he fought Eusebio Pedrosa for the world title, a year or so on, 20 million viewers. When Frank Bruno was fighting non-title fights on BBC, probably doing the same numbers as Barry, 4 or 5 mil. This was an era where they were able to market and sell fighters without belts attached to the fights. And they were doing that from Billy Walker and Henry Cooper in the 60s in Britain. So when Eddie Hearn and the boxers say they want to fight for these sanctioning belts because of the legacy, well, how deep is that legacy going? There's not a sanctioning belt out there in its current state that goes back to the 1920s, like the Ring Magazine belt. So the fighters may want to fight for legacy, but there's a couple of belts in boxing that go way, way, way back. The Ring Magazine belt goes back to 1922. The British Lonsdale belt goes back to 1909. And look, Eddie might be right. The boxers might want to fight for these belts because Sugar Ray Leonard had it. These great fighters had the WBC strap and whatnot, or maybe the WBA belt. But at what benefit is it to the fans when there's 4 different belts now? And then for every belt, there's probably an interim champion. There's regular champions. They're selling interim title fights on pay-per-view. Now, it might be a great deal for some of the fighters because they get to be on TV and perhaps the promoter and the broadcaster can promote the bout as a world title fight and put some money in their pocket, perhaps. But it gets awfully confusing for boxing fans, casual, hardcore, and those who straddle in between because there's so many belts. Who's really the champion? Dana in this Zuffa or Zuffa belt. Eddie's saying it's not going to work because, the fighters want to fight for sanctioning belts, but it depends how the belt's formatted. If it's formatted as the other sanctioning belts are, yeah, it's going to flop.
No matter how nice they are, they're going to flop.
But if it's formatted in a tournament structure, like the Contender Series, that's what Dana said he's going for, that's a different topic. Take football, for instance. Everything is formatted in a competitive structure, either a cup or a league. Its simplicity in its success leaves an old weed head who didn't finish school like me baffled why the sanctioning bodies, the commissioners, the boards and the promoters in boxing haven't clicked on that this is what the fans want. But this has to be consistent. Whatever structure it is, the tournament or league has to be in place consistently, year after year, year after year. Every now and then we get a tournament, the one that Andre Ward won, but there was only 2 belts involved in that. We had the WBSS, which was very good but very fleeting. I believe Usyk and Inoue became undisputed champions from out of the WBSS tournaments. Back in the 90s and 80s, Don King put on unification tournaments with all the belts on the line. Hopkins became undisputed at 160 in the 90s. Tyson became undisputed at heavyweight in the 80s. The thing is, though, Eddie's saying the Zuffa belt isn't something the fighters desire. Well, the prize fighter tournament comprised of journeymen, fringe contenders, past it fighters, a lot of fighters moonlighting with other jobs, and it was incredibly successful for Matchroom before AJ and Carl Froch in the stadium fight era. You have the opening rounds, then you get a quarter-final, semi-final, then a final. There's a story there for the fans to latch onto. And Eddie saying, I'm not going to get beaten by Dana. You're going to try and build stars and undisputed champions with the sanctioning belts. Well, you can do that as long as Turkey is financing that. And even though Turkey's got the promoters working together, there's still egos and risk-reward being played by promoters and boxing, stopping all the fights that need to be made from being made. Boxing has to change the format, and Dana is onto something. I don't blame Dana for not wanting to work with Clapback Thursday Oscar or Al Heyman or Bob Arum and all the cutthroat shit that's gone on between the various promotional outlets in boxing. I don't blame him. He said he stays in his own bubble, and I don't blame him. Stand on your own, fall on your own. Dana don't want to have to go to Oscar De La Hoya to make fights, or Bob Arum, because it's too much hard work. And you can see he just hasn't got the patience for that. He's not fucking with that. That's why he started his own thing with UFC. Whether you guys want to say it was bad or good, I didn't follow it like you guys. But it was his own thing. And he didn't have to go through other promoters to make fights. And until boxing gets in a place where it doesn't have to go through a whole load of promoters to make fights, it's fucked. Granted, that has changed since Turkey got on the scene. The promoters are working with each other more than what we've seen previously. But even if you get the promoters all together, what about the sanctioning bodies? You got to go through 4 fucking sanctioning bodies to get an undisputed fight. There's some bullshit. Dana's saying, no, I'll make my own belt, make my own league. They don't have to be no elite fighters. He just needs to get a competitive gene pool of fighters who are willing to fight each other. And then after a time, we're going to be saying, Fighter X is fighting Fighter B in the quarterfinals, in the semifinals, in the final. While on the other side of the street, the WBC have created a super interim title now. Or so-and-so has been sitting in the number one spot for 4 fucking years and fought 6 eliminators and still ain't got a title shot. We're still going to be having them debates. If Dana can have competitions consistently for the next 4 or 5 years, that will build familiarity with the fan base. They know what they're going to get. We can't do that with boxing. We're so grateful when we get undisputed fights in boxing, and it shouldn't be the case. And I'm not saying it's necessarily going to work, the contender idea, or the changing of the Muhammad Ali Act. I don't know. I have to see how it plays out. But watching boxing from the 80s, how important it was to ESPN, HBO, and Showtime, and now they're out, there must be a serious reason for that. They produced stars like Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield, George Foreman's comeback, Oscar De La Hoya, Pernell Whitaker, Hector Camacho, Thomas Hearns, Marvin Hagler, Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather, Tito Trinidad, and they don't want it no more?
They don't want it. They don't want it.
I mean, Matchroom were even trying to revive the prize fighter tournament in Japan, and it fell apart. Frank Smith was overlooking it. Someone asked Frank what happened. Matchroom versus Queensbury. Yeah, Matchroom lost 10-0. So what? It was a great watch. It was great entertainment. That's what it's all about. Competition structures. Because basically, after a time, maybe everyone's right. The likes of Turkey ain't going to need Frank Warren. Ain't going to need Eddie Hearn. If we're just going to make world title fights with no structure, if this fight is going to lead to a unification and undisputed, after a time, yeah, they may well eliminate the quote-unquote middlemen, Frank Warren and Eddie. People are going over to the misfits to see what will happen if you stick your dick in a fucking pit full of snakes. Just put it in a boxing ring and people will watch it.
Because at the end of the day, fighters want belt.
Maybe they do. Maybe they just want the money that's attached to the belts. What about the fans? Maybe we don't want to keep paying out for pay-per-views and you can't guarantee us undisputed. In the 17 plus weight classes we have, at least once every 2 years, there should be a concerted effort in every weight class to have an undisputed champion. Once every 2 years, that should take place. No excuses. I don't think we can make it once every year, because the preparation it takes for fighters to get ready for fights and the contract dynamics are different to other league constructed sports. There should be concerted efforts from the sanctioning bodies and the promoters and the broadcasters. We're not getting that. And we're paying out pay-per-view every second. Dana's joint, for now, is the price of subscription. There's no franchise in boxing. There's no sponsors who are going to say we're going to support the undisputed World Championship Boxing League. I know it's a mouthful, but we don't have it. There's nothing to connect all the dots together in pro boxing. Nothing. And look, I've said it in this video that I don't know if changing the Muhammad Ali Act, changing the size of the ring, trying to go for this contender format, I don't know if it works. I have to see if it plays out. I am saying this. Whether Dana's the man for the job or not, we are now in a process of change. And if Dana has to step aside because he's not up to it, then someone else is going to have to step in and bring reform to the structure of the sport. One way or the other, this has to happen. Not just in America, globally. So this is just the start. A lot of people, they're not visionaries and they can't see the process of when change is starting and it's right in front of them. There's no going back. The TKO League only addresses maybe a third of the issues that need to be addressed for boxers and boxing fans. And we haven't even seen a punch thrown. And it's causing all this controversy. But let's bear in mind, there's only 4,000 fighters in America, of which Dana will have, what, a tenth? So all this, he's going to kick everyone out of boxing, is mildly, let me say, overreacting. Like a lot of people have overreacted every time his name has come up. I mean, in the last week, he signed 2 deals, one with Ben Shalom in conjunction with the BBC deal and Boxer. Signed another deal with Matchroom, so he'll be getting involved with the snooker and darts as well as boxing. Doesn't sound like he's abandoning the promoters at all.
A Zuffa belt, that's thinking big. That ain't thinking big.
Like, there's questions I want to know. If they're going to compete for the Zuffa belt and the Ring Magazine belt. Now they're going to have 2 belts, not 1, 2. If he's not going to mess with the other promoters and his fighters are going to compete for the Ring Magazine belt, how does that work? Are they going to have another Ring Magazine belt separate from the one that the fighters outside the TKO compete for? Well, like I said before, that's just bringing more belts to the situation. Change is not always welcomed, and change doesn't always get things right first time around. If the people within the industry don't like the amendments to the Ali Act, the proposed guidelines, well, let's see you bring something in writing that you have to commit to. Competition and challenge to the current infrastructure is needed. The whole notion that people think one man can ruin boxing for everybody, one bald-headed guy who ran UFC can ruin boxing for the whole world, is the most stupidest and ignorant position you could possibly take. If the TKO brand isn't good, bring something better. Crying, bitching and moaning doesn't cut it. Bring something better. There's 4,000 plus fighters in America. The goal for TKO is to have 400 fighters on their roster. That's 1/10 of fighters who fight in America. That's not all the boxers, nowhere near all of them. And I don't think they're going to get to 400. Not anytime soon. When you see the people in the industry constantly picking and poking at Dana, but they're not bringing an alternative, all they're doing is using you to do their dirty work, to run Dana out of the dance, but have no intentions of doing anything to reform or change a sport that is in severe need of change and reform.
Changes, everything revolves around changes. Used to be friends, now we strangers. Used to call it love, now it's hate. We so hateful, take for granted every single thing. Used to be grateful, gratitude turned into an attitude. Even though I did way more than I had to do, still I'm never mad at you. You was just infatuated, you was like a dime and a half, had me captivated. Told me that you need your cell phone plan activated, I just turned it on. Said you would never have to pay it, that's how it went down. Soon after that, had you pinned down. How is it I'm the one you resent now? Fuck it, changes always creep up. I was making money with my feet up, chopping white rock down, cooking in the lab like a chemist. I knew the racket well like tennis. Niggas I was friends with, mostly either dead or doing letters in the state pen. That type of hardship could either break men or make men. It made me, not saying that it saved me. All I'm telling you is that it gave me a new perspective, motivation, made me get focused. The underlying reason for this opus, I know it's changes gonna happen. Even if you scared, it don't matter, get prepared. Most of the things I feared were things that I ain't know about. And things I used to worship, I found that I could go without. If it don't apply, let it fly, nigga, throw it out. But if I struck a nerve, there's some shit that you should know about. Economies are changing, philosophies are changing, levels of disasters and atrocities changing. The climate is changing, soldiers out on mission, their assignment is changing. Changes, friends become strangers. Areas that used to be safe is now dangerous. Playgrounds are pitiful, they try to make jail seem hospitable. Although you still in hell, you might forget it though. Changes, different outlooks, new resolutions, new interpretations, same old constitution. HIV, still no solution to it. Change the focus from the lab where they grew it to the way it's transmitted. We call that the bait and switch. Wanna know who responsible? See who is making rich. Changes creep up, sometimes they happen sudden. Nuclear capabilities, push the button. They say that we are gluttons to the pain, resistant to the change. Probably why we caught up in the game. Niggas chasing fame instead of hunting down integrity. Saying life is short but don't understand its brevity. Change is the only constant, it's consistent. Viruses, they becoming drug resistant. Preparation, the only way to elevation. You can see the false hope they try to sell a nation. I think decapitation is the only way to kill a beast. We be like some sitting ducks, hunted like some wildebeest. I know this won't kill the streets cause the streets ain't ready for it, but the streets killing itself on a deadly course. Changes.